The abandoned storage facility on Route 9 reeked of rust and broken dreams, but Emma Chen needed that $50 unit more than her next breath. 6 months pregnant, evicted, down to her last $20, she'd gamble on anything. The auctioneer's hammer fell, and Unit 47 was hers. Inside, past the dusty Christmas decorations, stood 12 steel barrels marked with biohazard symbols. What Emma didn't know was that 5 years ago, she'd been the lead chemist who'd helped develop what was inside those barrels. Memory gaps from a car accident had stolen that part of her life, but the pharmaceutical giant Nexus Corp hadn't forgotten her. They'd been hunting for their missing research for years. Now, as Emma's phone buzzed with calls from unknown numbers and black SUVs circled her neighborhood, she realized the accident that stole her memories might not have been an accident at all. The question that would determine whether she and her unborn child lived or died was simple. What had her former self discovered that Nexus Corp would kill to keep buried? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emma's hands trembled as she stared at the barrels, each one roughly the size of a small trash can. The fluorescent lighting overhead flickered, casting eerie shadows across the biohazard symbols that seemed to pulse with warning. Her baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing danger. She pulled out her phone's flashlight, illuminating serial numbers etched into the metal. The codes meant nothing to her now, but something deep in her subconscious stirred, a fragment of recognition that made her stomach clench. "What the hell did I buy?" she whispered. The storage unit auction had been her last resort. With her landlord's eviction notice crumpled in her car and her bank account showing a balance that wouldn't cover a decent meal, she'd spotted the auction signs and decided to take a chance. Maybe there'd be something valuable she could sell, some forgotten treasure that could buy her time. Instead, she'd inherited what looked like toxic waste. Emma backed toward the roll-up door, but her phone buzzed again. The caller ID showed only numbers, the same pattern she'd been ignoring all morning. This time, she answered. "Hello?" Silence stretched across the line. Then a man's voice, calm and professional. "Miss Chen, we understand you've made a recent purchase." Her blood turned to ice water. "Who is this?" "A concerned party. The items you've acquired are dangerous. We're prepared to offer you compensation for their return, substantial compensation." Emma glanced at the barrels. If someone was willing to pay for them, they had to be worth something. How substantial? $50,000. Cash. Today. The number hit her like a physical blow. 50,000 would solve everything. Apartment deposits, baby supplies, medical bills. But the voice on the phone carried an undertone that made her skin crawl. "What's in those barrels?" she asked. "Nothing you need to concern yourself with. We'll handle disposal. All you need to do is tell us the location." Emma's free hand moved protectively to her belly. "And if I say no?" The pause lasted too long. "That would be unwise, Ms. Chen. You have a baby to think about." The line went dead. Emma's legs gave out, and she sank onto a moldy cardboard box. The threat was clear, but something else nagged at her. The caller had known about the barrels before she'd even examined them properly. How was that possible, unless they'd been watching her? She forced herself to stand and approach the nearest barrel. A small placard was attached to its side, partially obscured by grime. She wiped it clean, and her flashlight revealed a corporate logo she didn't recognize, a double helix intertwined with the letter N. Below it, a signature line with her own name written in handwriting she couldn't remember making. Dr. Emma Chen, lead research chemist. The phone slipped from her nerveless fingers and clattered on the concrete floor. The impact triggered a memory flash. Her own voice, younger and more confident, arguing with someone in a lab coat. "The side effects are too severe. We can't release this. People will die." The memory vanished as quickly as it came, leaving her gasping. Outside, car doors slammed. Emma peered through the gap under the roll-up door and saw 2 pairs of expensive black shoes approaching. Her heart hammered against her ribs, As she looked around the storage unit for another exit, there wasn't one. She grabbed a crowbar from a pile of tools in the corner and positioned herself behind the Christmas tree, its artificial branches providing meager cover. The baby kicked again, harder this time, and Emma bit back a gasp of pain. The footsteps stopped directly outside Unit 47. A new voice, different from the one on the phone, spoke quietly. Motion sensors confirmed she's inside. Remember, we need her alive until we know what she remembers. The acrid smell hit Emma the moment she cut through the rusted padlock. She stumbled backward, one hand flying to cover her nose and mouth, the other instinctively protecting her rounded belly. The chemical stench was so sharp it made her eyes water, nothing like the musty odor of old furniture she'd expected. "Jesus," she muttered, fishing her phone from her pocket to use as a flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness of the storage unit, revealing not the hoped-for vintage dresser or dining set, but rows upon rows of blue plastic barrels, stacked 3 high against the metal walls. Emma's heart sank. $50 down the drain, money she couldn't afford to lose. The baby kicked as if sensing her disappointment, and she rubbed her belly absently while stepping closer to examine her purchase. Each barrel bore identical white labels with cryptic alphanumeric codes: TXN 4471, TXN 4472, TXN 4473. Below the codes, smaller text read "Property of Meridian Industries" in bold black letters. A red diamond-shaped symbol she didn't recognize was stamped beneath the company name. "Great," she whispered, "just great." She'd bid on the unit sight unseen at the online auction, gambling that the previous owner had defaulted on something valuable. The grainy photo had shown only shadows and the vague outline of what could have been furniture. Now she was stuck with what appeared to be industrial waste. The smell was getting worse. Emma pulled her sweater up over her nose, but the fabric barely helped. Whatever was in these barrels, it wasn't something she wanted to be breathing, especially not while pregnant. She needed to get out of here and figure out how to dispose of them safely. As she turned to leave, her phone's light caught something else, a manila folder wedged between 2 barrels. Emma hesitated, then carefully pulled it free. The tab was labeled TXN Batch 44, Disposal Authorization Required. Inside were dozens of lab reports, shipping manifests, and correspondence on Meridian Industries' letterhead. The technical language was largely incomprehensible, but certain phrases jumped out: exceeds EPA limits, groundwater contamination risk, and most chilling, immediate disposal required per federal mandate. Emma's hands began to shake as she flipped through page after page of what appeared to be test results showing dangerous levels of something called trichloroethylene. One memo, dated just 3 months ago, made her blood run cold. Legal advises immediate destruction of batch 44 following Cincinnati facility inspection. Transport to approved disposal site authorized. Under no circumstances should these materials remain in temporary storage beyond 30 days. Criminal liability assured if discovered. The signature at the bottom belonged to someone named Dr. Marcus Webb, Director of Environmental Compliance. A car door slammed somewhere outside the storage facility, followed by voices. Emma's pulse quickened as she stuffed the folder inside her jacket. The voices were getting closer, accompanied by footsteps on gravel. Male voices, professional, urgent. "Unit 247 should be 3 rows over," one said. "Goddamn auction company." "This was supposed to be handled internally," another replied. Emma's storage unit was 247. Her mouth went dry as she realized they were coming for the barrels. She quickly turned off her phone's flashlight and pressed herself against the wall beside the open door, heart hammering against her ribs. The footsteps stopped directly outside her unit. "Door's been cut," the first voice said, now close enough that Emma could hear the concern in his tone. "Shit. Someone beat us here." Emma held her breath, one hand pressed against her belly to muffle any sounds from the baby's movement. Through the gap in the door, she could see the beam of a powerful flashlight scanning the interior of the unit. "Barrels are still here," the second man said, "but someone's definitely been inside. Look at those footprints in the dust. We need to call Webb. If someone found the documentation." "There's no documentation. We destroyed everything." Emma's grip tightened on the folder beneath her jacket. The metal edge was digging into her ribs, but she didn't dare adjust it. "Check the surrounding units. Whoever bought this might still be around." The footsteps began moving away, but Emma knew they'd be back with reinforcements. She waited until she couldn't hear them anymore, then carefully peered around the doorframe. The storage facility appeared empty, but she could see flashlight beams dancing between buildings in the distance. Moving as quickly as her pregnant body would allow, Emma slipped out of the unit and made her way toward the parking area where her beat-up Honda waited. She needed to get home and figure out exactly what she'd stumbled into. As she drove away, she caught a glimpse in her rearview mirror of two black SUVs pulling into the facility's entrance, their headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights hunting for prey. The pregnancy test had shown 2 pink lines 3 weeks after the storage unit auction, and Emma's first thought hadn't been about morning sickness or baby names. It had been about the rent money she'd blown on what turned out to be industrial waste. The irony wasn't lost on her now as she stood in the narrow aisle between towering metal barrels, one hand pressed against her still flat stomach. She'd come back to the storage unit every few days since the purchase, hoping to find something salvageable buried beneath the chemical containers. The barrels were surprisingly heavy, sealed with thick metal lids that bore faded warning labels she couldn't quite make out in the dim light. Most were in languages she didn't recognize, but the universal symbols for hazardous materials were clear enough. The smell hit her differently today, sharper, more acrid. Her newly sensitive nose wrinkled as she picked her way toward the back corner where she'd spotted what looked like a filing cabinet during her first visit. Morning sickness had kept her away for a week, but desperation drove her back. She needed something, anything, to justify the $50 that should have gone toward groceries. The filing cabinet was locked, but the metal was old and rust had weakened the mechanism. A few minutes with a crowbar she'd found among the debris, and the top drawer groaned open. Inside, manila folders stuffed with papers bore the letterhead of Meridian Chemical Corporation. Emma's pulse quickened. Maybe there was something valuable here, some kind of documentation she could sell. The first folder contained shipping manifests dated 18 months ago, lists of chemical compounds with names she couldn't pronounce, quantities measured in tons, and destination addresses scattered across 3 states. What caught her attention were the handwritten notes in the margins. Batch 47C, higher concentration than authorized and EPA inspection scheduled, delay shipment. Her hands trembled as she opened the second folder. Laboratory reports filled with technical jargon, but certain phrases jumped out: exceeds safe exposure limits by 300% and recommend immediate cessation of production. A yellow sticky note was attached to one report. Legal says bury this. Cheaper to pay fines later than retool now. MK. The third folder made her stomach lurch, and not from morning sickness. Photographs showed a residential area she didn't recognize, but the images were devastating. Dead fish floating in a creek, brown grass stretching across what should have been green lawns, and children's playground equipment sitting abandoned in a field of withered trees. Medical records were clipped to the photos: cancer diagnoses, birth defects, respiratory illnesses affecting dozens of families. A loose sheet of paper fluttered to the ground, and Emma's blood ran cold as she read the header: Riverside Elementary School Health Survey, Anomalous Cancer Cluster Investigation. She recognized that name. It had been in the news 2 years ago, a small town where an unusual number of children had developed leukemia. The investigation had been inconclusive, officials claimed, with no environmental cause identified. But here was the evidence they'd never found: internal memos discussing the illegal dumping of chemical waste that had contaminated the groundwater near the school, references to falsified EPA reports and bribed inspectors. a paper trail that led directly to Meridian Chemicals' executive offices, complete with signatures and corporate seals. Emma's phone buzzed, making her jump. A text from her landlord: "Rent is 3 days late, pay by Friday or start packing." She stared at the message, then at the damning evidence spread across the grimy storage unit floor. The moral calculus was brutal in its simplicity. Her unborn child's future weighed against justice for families she'd never meet. She photographed every document with her phone, the camera flash creating stark shadows between the chemical barrels. As she worked, a new smell reached her nose, something sweet and cloying that made her head spin. One of the barrels in the far corner had a hairline crack along its base, and a thin stream of amber liquid pooled on the concrete floor. The sight sent a spike of panic through her chest. If these chemicals were dangerous enough to cause what she'd seen in those photos, what was she exposing herself and her baby to right now? She stuffed the papers back into the folders, grabbed the most damning evidence, and stumbled toward the exit. Outside in the fresh air, Emma's mind raced. She could turn this over to the authorities, the EPA, the FBI, maybe a journalist. But Meridian Chemical was a corporation worth billions, the kind of company that could make problems disappear, the kind that had already made one investigation go away. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her doctor's office, confirming her appointment for the following week, the appointment where she'd hear her baby's heartbeat for the first time. The reminder crystallized her resolve in a way that surprised her with its intensity. She had 6 months to figure this out, 6 months to find a way to expose the truth, without destroying her own life in the process. The $50 gamble had just become something much more dangerous than a financial mistake. The storage unit's fluorescent light flickered overhead as Emma stared at the metal barrel, her hands trembling as she held the printout from Dr. Chen's lab. The chemical analysis results painted a horrifying picture: industrial solvents, heavy metals, and compounds she couldn't even pronounce, all at concentrations that made her stomach churn. The baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing her distress. She'd counted 43 barrels total, each one sealed with a corporate logo she'd finally identified through an online search. Meridian Industries, a chemical manufacturing giant with facilities across 3 states, the same company whose executives smiled from magazine covers while talking about environmental responsibility and community partnerships. Emma's phone buzzed. A text from Jake: "Mom's getting worse. Need you to watch her tonight. Can you pick up dinner?" She typed back quickly, her fingers shaking. "Can't tonight. Emergency at work." The lie came easily now. She'd been lying to everyone for 2 days, ever since she'd opened that first barrel and nearly passed out from the fumes. How could she tell Jake that his pregnant sister had stumbled onto what looked like an illegal dumping operation? How could she explain that every breath she took in this place might be poisoning the baby growing inside her? A sound outside made her freeze. Footsteps on gravel, slow and deliberate. Emma quickly switched off the light and pressed herself against the wall beside the door. Through the gap beneath the metal roll-up door, she could see shadows moving past. "Told you, Unit 47 was purchased 2 days ago." The voice was male, unfamiliar, with a slight accent she couldn't place. By who? Another man. This one with a rougher edge to his tone. Some woman. Single mother, according to the clerk. Emma Sullivan. Emma's blood turned to ice. They knew her name. Find out everything about her. Address, family, work history, everything. Already on it. She lives in Riverside Apartments with her brother and their mother, works part-time at Sacred Heart Medical Center, 6 months pregnant, no father in the picture. The casual recitation of her life details made Emma feel exposed, vulnerable. These weren't random criminals. They were professionals with resources and information networks. "What about the contents?" the first voice asked. "Still here. She hasn't removed anything yet, but the seals are broken on at least 3 containers. If she's seen what's inside, then we have a problem." Emma held her breath, her hand instinctively moving to her belly. The baby shifted, and she pressed gently, trying to keep calm. "Orders?" A long pause. Monitor her. See what she does next. If she goes to the authorities, we'll know immediately. We have people in place. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. People in place. That could mean police, city officials, anyone. Her mind raced through the options. Who could she trust? Where could she turn? What about the cleanup? Not yet. Moving 43 barrels will attract attention, and the facility has cameras. We need to be smart about this. Give her a few days. Maybe she'll just walk away. And if she doesn't, another pause. Longer this time. Pregnant women can be fragile. Accidents happen. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Emma pressed her back harder against the wall, fighting the urge to run. But where would she go? They already knew where she lived, where she worked. Running would only confirm their suspicions. The footsteps moved away, but Emma waited another 10 minutes before switching the light back on. Her mind was spinning, trying to process what she'd heard. Meridian Industries wasn't just dumping chemicals illegally, they had people watching her, ready to hurt her if she threatened their operation. She looked at the barrels with new understanding. This wasn't just environmental contamination. This was evidence of a crime that went all the way to the top of a major corporation. No wonder they were willing to threaten a pregnant woman to keep it quiet. Emma's phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unknown number. We know what you found. Walk away and everyone stays safe. Her hands shook as she deleted the message, but she'd already memorized every word. They weren't just monitoring her, they were actively trying to intimidate her into silence. But they'd made a mistake. They'd threatened her baby, and that changed everything. Emma grabbed the chemical analysis printout and stuffed it into her purse, then took photos of every barrel with her phone, making sure to capture the Meridian Industries logos clearly. If they wanted to play hardball, she'd give them a game they wouldn't forget. She had evidence of illegal dumping by a major corporation, and despite their threats, she wasn't going to disappear quietly into the night. Not when there were 43 barrels of poison that could contaminate groundwater for decades. Not when her unborn child's future depended on her courage. The musty air of the storage unit hit Emma like a wall as she rolled up the metal door. Sunlight streamed in, illuminating dust motes that danced above rows of plastic barrels stacked 3 high along the back wall. Her heart sank. This wasn't the furniture goldmine she'd hoped for. "Great," she muttered, one hand instinctively moving to her growing belly. $50 down the drain. She stepped inside, her footsteps echoing in the confined space. The barrels were identical, white plastic with tight-fitting lids, each bearing a series of numbers stamped in black ink. No labels, no company logos, nothing to indicate what they contained. Emma counted at least 30 of them. The baby kicked, making her wince. At 6 months, every movement was becoming more pronounced, more demanding of her attention. She needed to find something valuable here, anything that could help with the mounting medical bills and rent that was already 2 weeks overdue. She approached the nearest barrel and tried to lift the lid. It was sealed tight, secured with what looked like industrial-grade tape around the edges. The plastic felt thick, heavy-duty, not like the cheap storage containers she was used to. Whatever was inside, someone had gone to great lengths to keep it contained. Emma pulled out her keys and used the sharp edge to score the tape. The seal gave way with a soft pop, and immediately her nose wrinkled at a sharp chemical smell that made her eyes water. She jerked back, covering her mouth. "Jesus!" she gasped, the acrid odor burning her throat. This definitely wasn't household items. Despite every instinct telling her to leave, curiosity won. She needed to know what she'd bought. Holding her breath, she pried off the lid completely and peered inside. The barrel was filled with a dark, viscous liquid that reflected the overhead light like oil, but the smell was wrong, too sharp, too artificial. Floating near the surface were what looked like chunks of organic matter, brownish and deteriorated beyond recognition. Emma's stomach lurched. She stumbled backward, the lid clattering to the concrete floor. The baby responded to her distress with a series of violent kicks that made her double over. "Okay, okay," she whispered to her unborn child, trying to calm herself. "We're okay." But they weren't okay. Nothing about this was okay. She fumbled for her phone, hands shaking as she Googled the numbers stamped on the barrel. The search results made her blood run cold. Chemical waste disposal codes, industrial solvents, toxic materials. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, the security guard at her apartment complex, black SUV, asking about you. Didn't like the look of them. Told them you moved out. Emma's breath caught. She'd only bought the storage unit yesterday. How could anyone already know to connect her to it? She backed toward the door, her mind racing. The previous owner of this unit, what had happened to them? Why hadn't they come to claim something this valuable or dangerous? And why were people already looking for her? Another barrel had been damaged, she noticed now, a hairline crack running down one side with dried residue staining the concrete beneath it. The smell was stronger here, making her dizzy. She needed fresh air, needed to think. She turned to leave. Something caught her eye, wedged behind the last row of barrels. A manila folder, water-stained and partially hidden. She hesitated, then grabbed it quickly. The folder contained photographs, dozens of them. Industrial facilities, men in hazmat suits, trucks with corporate logos she didn't recognize, and people, workers who looked sick, their skin mottled and pale. The photos were dated from 6 months ago. At the bottom of the stack was a letter, partially legible despite water damage. The letterhead read Meridian Industries, and the few sentences she could make out sent ice through her veins. Contained exposure incident, immediate disposal required, no regulatory oversight, eliminate all evidence. Her phone rang, making her jump. Unknown number. Hello? Silence. Then a man's voice, calm and measured. Ms. Rodriguez. We understand you've recently acquired some property that belongs to us. We'd like to arrange a meeting. I don't know what you're talking about, Emma said, backing out of the storage unit. Storage unit 247. We're prepared to offer you $10,000 for its contents, no questions asked. We can meet tonight. Emma's mouth went dry. $10,000. It would solve everything. Rent, medical bills, a chance to start over. But the photos in her hand told a different story. People had suffered for whatever was in those barrels. People had died. I need time to think, she managed. Of course, but Ms. Rodriguez? Time is a luxury neither of us can afford. We'll call again in 2 hours. The line went dead. Emma stared at her phone, then at the barrels, then at the photographs that proved these weren't just chemical waste containers. They were evidence of something much worse. And now, she was the only one who knew. The fluorescent lights in the diner buzzed overhead as Emma slid into the cracked vinyl booth, her hands trembling as she gripped the ceramic coffee mug. Marcus sat across from her, his weathered face etched with concern as he studied the photographs she'd spread across the table like evidence at a crime scene. Jesus, Emma, he whispered, picking up one of the images showing the barrel's corroded interior. You said there were dozens of these things? She nodded, unconsciously placing a protective hand over her growing belly. The baby had been unusually active all morning, as if sensing her anxiety. 47 barrels, all sealed, some are leaking. Her voice caught. Marcus, what if I've been breathing in something toxic? What if it's already hurt the baby? Marcus reached across the table and squeezed her free hand. At 62, he'd seen plenty in his years as a chemical plant supervisor before retirement, but the grim expression on his face told Emma everything she feared. These markings here, he pointed to symbols barely visible in one photograph. This isn't standard industrial waste. This is military-grade stuff, highly regulated. Nobody just dumps this in storage units. So what does that mean? It means whoever put these barrels there was either incredibly stupid or incredibly desperate. Marcus pulled out reading glasses and examined another photo more closely. See this corrosion pattern? This stuff has been eating through the containers for years. If it's what I think it is, you're looking at potential contamination that could affect groundwater for decades. Emma's stomach dropped. The storage facility sits right above the city's water treatment plant. There are neighborhoods all around it. How many people know about this? Just you. Emma glanced around the nearly empty diner, paranoid despite the mundane setting of truckers and late-shift workers grabbing coffee. I tried calling the EPA yesterday, but when I mentioned the storage unit location, they transferred me 3 times, and then the line went dead. Marcus frowned. That's not normal protocol. Environmental agencies jump on this kind of thing. He gathered the photographs into a neat stack. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Have you noticed anyone following you? Phone calls where nobody speaks? Anything unusual? The question sent ice through her veins because she had noticed things. The same black sedan parked across from her apartment 2 mornings in a row. The feeling of being watched at the grocery store. The hang-up calls that started the day after she'd tried contacting the EPA. Maybe, she admitted. I thought I was being paranoid. In this situation, paranoid is smart. Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice. I'm going to make some calls to people I trust, but Emma, you need to be very careful about who else you talk to. If these chemicals are what I suspect, and if someone powerful enough to make EPA calls disappear is involved, then you've stumbled into something much bigger than contaminated storage units. The baby kicked hard against Emma's ribs, making her wince. She rubbed the spot, trying to calm both herself and her unborn child. I can't just pretend I didn't see this. People could get sick. Children could get sick. I'm not suggesting you ignore it. I'm suggesting you be smart about it. Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled through contacts. There's a woman I know, investigative journalist named Sarah Chen. She's got experience with corporate cover-ups and environmental crimes. But before we contact her, I want to run some tests. What kind of tests? I've got connections at an independent lab. If you can get me a small sample of the leaked material, and I mean small using proper protection, I can have it analyzed without going through official channels that might tip off whoever's behind this. Emma's pulse quickened. You want me to go back there? Not alone. I'll come with you, tonight after dark. Marcus's expression was deadly serious. But Emma, once we do this, once we confirm what these chemicals are and get the evidence we need, there's no going back. You'll be committed to seeing this through, and that could put you and your baby in real danger. The weight of the decision pressed down on her like the oppressive summer heat outside the diner. 6 months ago, she'd been worried about rent money and whether she could afford the baby's crib. Now she was contemplating exposing what appeared to be a massive environmental crime while carrying a child and having nowhere to run if things went wrong. But then she thought about the families living near the storage facility, about children playing in yards potentially contaminated by whatever was seeping from those barrels. She thought about her own baby, who deserved to be born into a world where corporations couldn't poison communities and cover it up. Okay, she said quietly. Tonight. Marcus nodded grimly and signaled the waitress for the check. Neither of them noticed the man in the corner booth who had been sitting there since before they arrived, nursing the same cup of coffee while listening to every word. The coffee shop buzzed with the typical morning rush, but Emma felt completely isolated in her corner booth despite the crowd. She wrapped her hands around her decaf latte, trying to steady her nerves as she waited for Marcus Chen. The investigative journalist had agreed to meet her after she'd reached out through his newspaper's encrypted tip line, but now that the moment had arrived, doubt crept in like a cold fog. What if he didn't believe her? What if Apex had already gotten to him? What if this was all an elaborate trap? Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, red jacket, glasses, walking in now. Emma looked up to see a lean Asian man in his 30s scanning the cafe. When their eyes met, he nodded slightly and made his way over. Marcus Chen looked younger than his byline photo, but his eyes held the wariness of someone who'd seen too much. Emma? He slid into the seat across from her, keeping his voice low. Thank you for reaching out. Your message was intriguing. Emma studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. How do I know you're really who you say you are? Marcus pulled out his press credentials and placed them on the table. Smart to be cautious. In my line of work, paranoia keeps you breathing. He glanced around the cafe. Though I have to say, Your story sounded almost too incredible to believe. Chemical waste? Corporate cover-ups? Missing people? I have proof. Emma's hand moved instinctively to her laptop bag. But first, I need to know, have you ever heard of Apex Industries? Something shifted in Marcus's expression, a flicker of recognition quickly suppressed. Should I have? You tell me. You're the investigative journalist. Marcus leaned back, considering. They're a chemical manufacturing company, technically legitimate, but there have been whispers, nothing I could ever substantiate. Why? Emma made her decision. She pulled out her laptop and angled the screen so only Marcus could see. Because 6 months ago, I bought a storage unit at auction, and inside, I found something that Apex Industries would kill to keep secret. She opened the folder containing Dave's photographs, barrel after barrel of toxic waste, the shipping manifests, the correspondence she'd found. Marcus's eyes widened as she scrolled through the images. Jesus, he whispered. Where is this? The storage unit was cleaned out the day after I found this, but I made copies of everything first. Emma pulled up the manifest showing the chemical compositions. These aren't just any chemicals. Some of these compounds are banned for good reason. Marcus studied the documents with growing intensity. These shipping records, they show transport to residential areas, neighborhoods where families live. He looked up at her. Do you understand what this means? That Apex has been illegally dumping toxic waste in populated areas for years? Emma's voice carried a bitter edge. Yeah, I figured that out. What I can't figure out is why Dave Morrison, the guy who originally rented the storage unit, disappeared right before the auction. Dave Morrison? Marcus's fingers froze over the keyboard where he'd been taking notes. Tall guy, worked as a truck driver? Emma's blood chilled. You knew him? He contacted me 3 months ago, said he had information about illegal dumping, wanted to meet, but he never showed up for our appointment. Marcus's expression darkened. I tried following up, but it was like he'd vanished completely. The weight of the revelation settled between them. Emma felt the baby shift inside her, as if responding to her elevated stress. They killed him, she said quietly. Didn't they? I don't know. But if what you're showing me is real, Marcus gestured to the laptop screen, this could bring down some very powerful people, the kind who don't hesitate to eliminate problems. Emma closed the laptop. Which brings me to why I need your help. They know I have this information. They've been watching me, following me. Yesterday, someone broke into my apartment. She touched her belly protectively. I'm running out of time and options. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing the risks. Publishing something like this, it would require extensive verification, legal review. It could take months. I don't have months. Emma's voice cracked slightly. I'm 6 months pregnant, and these people have already shown they're willing to kill to protect their secret. If I wait for the slow machinery of journalism to grind forward, I'll be dead. Then what are you proposing? Emma leaned forward. I give you everything I have. You start building the story, establishing credibility with your editors, but we also need to force Apex's hand somehow. Make them panic. Do something reckless that exposes them publicly. Marcus considered this. That's dangerous. Cornered animals bite. They're already biting, Emma replied. At least this way I'm not just sitting around waiting for them to sink their teeth in. She met his gaze steadily. So are you in, or am I on my own? Emma's hands trembled as she stared at the email Dr. Martinez had forwarded. The laboratory report contained rows of technical jargon, but certain phrases leaped out like accusations: chronic exposure, cellular degradation, irreversible damage. Her baby kicked as if sensing her distress, and she pressed a protective hand to her swollen belly. The motel room felt smaller by the hour. She'd been hiding here for 3 days, surviving on vending machine snacks and bottled water, while Dr. Martinez worked his contacts. The pregnancy made everything harder, the constant need for bathroom breaks, the way her back ached from the sagging mattress, the knowledge that every day brought her closer to being completely helpless. Her burner phone buzzed. Marcus again. She'd been ignoring his calls, but his latest text made her stomach clench. "They know where you are. Get out. Now." Emma shoved her few belongings into the duffel bag, her movements clumsy with panic. Through the thin curtains, she glimpsed a black sedan pulling into the parking lot, moving too slowly, too deliberately. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The bathroom window was her only option. She'd scouted it yesterday, small but she could still fit, barely. She climbed onto the toilet seat, grateful for the first-floor location, and squeezed through the opening. The frame scraped against her belly, and she bit back a cry of pain. Behind the motel stretched a patch of scrubland dotted with abandoned shopping carts and fast food debris. Emma half ran, half waddled toward the gas station across the field, glancing back to see two men in dark suits approaching her former room. One spoke into a radio, while the other produced something from his jacket that made her blood freeze. A key card. They had access to any room they wanted. The gas station attendant barely looked up as she stumbled through the door, out of breath and sweating despite the evening chill. She needed transportation, but her car was back at the motel, probably already surrounded. The baby shifted restlessly, pressing against her lungs and making it hard to breathe. "You okay, lady?" The teenager behind the counter studied her with concern. "Fine," she managed. "Just need to use your phone." Dr. Martinez answered on the first ring. "Emma? Thank God. I've been trying to reach you. They found me. I need help." "I know. Marcus called me. Listen carefully. There's a truck stop about 2 miles north of your location, Blue Star Travel Plaza. Can you get there?" Emma looked through the gas station window. No sign of the sedan yet, but they'd search the area soon enough. Maybe. Why there? "I've arranged for someone to meet you, a journalist named Sarah Chen from the Washington Herald. She's been investigating Meridian Corporation for months. Marcus thinks she's our best shot at getting this story public. How do I know I can trust her? Because she's been receiving death threats too." Emma closed her eyes. Trust had become a luxury she couldn't afford, but staying isolated wasn't working either. "What does she look like?" "Asian woman, early 30s, drives a white Honda Civic. She'll be waiting in the parking lot at 9 p.m. That gives you an hour." The walk to Blue Star Travel Plaza felt endless. Emma kept to the shadows, moving from building to building, her duffel bag growing heavier with each step. The baby seemed to sense the stress, delivering sharp kicks that made her gasp. Twice she had to stop and lean against walls, fighting waves of dizziness. The travel plaza blazed with fluorescent light, 18-wheelers lined up like sleeping giants. Emma spotted the white Honda immediately, parked away from the main cluster of vehicles. Through the windshield, she could see a woman with shoulder-length black hair, fingers dancing over a laptop keyboard. Sarah Chen looked up as Emma approached, her expression shifting from wariness to shock. "Jesus, you're pregnant." 6 months. Emma slid into the passenger seat, grateful to be sitting again. "Dr. Martinez said you've been investigating Meridian." 8 months. Ever since 3 of their former employees died in what were ruled accidents. Sarah's eyes were sharp, intelligent. "I know about the storage unit, the barrels, the cover-up. What I need is proof." Emma reached into her bag and pulled out the flash drive containing her photographs. "Will this work?" Sarah plugged it into her laptop, her expression growing darker as she scrolled through the images. "Oh my God! Do you know what this is? Industrial waste, toxic chemicals. More than that. These markings, I've seen them before in leaked documents. This is biological warfare research waste from a Pentagon contract. Meridian was supposed to dispose of it safely, but instead," Sarah's voice trailed off as she studied a particularly damning photograph. "Instead, they dumped it in storage units and hoped nobody would notice," Emma finished. A pair of headlights swept across the parking lot, moving slowly, searching. Both women ducked down as the black sedan cruised past. "We need to go," Sarah whispered. "I know somewhere safe." Emma's hands trembled as she stared at the phone screen. Marcus's number glowing in the darkness of the motel room. 3 rings. 4. She was about to hang up when his voice crackled through. Emma? Jesus, where are you? I've been worried sick. I can't tell you that. She pressed her back against the headboard, every shadow in the room seeming to shift and breathe. Marcus, I need you to listen carefully. Meridian Industries, they're dumping toxic waste. The barrels I found, they're full of industrial chemicals that cause birth defects, cancer, God knows what else. Silence stretched between them. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was strained. Emma, you're pregnant. You're under enormous stress. Maybe you're seeing connections that... Don't. The word came out sharper than she intended. Don't you dare tell me I'm imagining this. They killed Dr. Chen. They've been following me. I have proof. What kind of proof? Emma pulled the flash drive from her pocket, its small weight feeling enormous in her palm. Documents, chemical analysis reports, financial records showing payments to trucking companies. It's all here. Where did you get this? Chen gave it to me before he died. He knew what they were doing. Her voice cracked. He tried to warn people and they murdered him for it. Another pause. Emma could hear Marcus breathing, could almost feel him weighing her words against what he thought he knew about her mental state. Okay, he said finally. Say you're right. What do you want me to do? Help me get this to the media. Someone who can't be bought off or scared away. Emma, if what you're saying is true, then you're in real danger. You need to come in. Let the police handle this. She laughed bitterly. The police? Marcus, they found me at a roadside diner in the middle of nowhere. Someone's feeding them information. I can't trust anyone in an official capacity. The baby kicked, a sharp reminder of what was at stake. Emma placed her hand over her belly, feeling the life moving inside her, life that might already be compromised by whatever toxins she'd been exposed to in that storage unit. There's something else, she whispered. The chemicals in those barrels, prolonged exposure can cause fetal abnormalities. I was in that unit for hours before I knew what I was dealing with. Emma, I might have poisoned my own child. The words tore from her throat like broken glass. My baby might be dying because I was desperate for $50 worth of junk. Stop. You can't think like that. We'll get you to a doctor, run some tests. With what money? I maxed out my credit cards just getting this far. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I can't even afford a decent meal, let alone prenatal care. Through the thin motel walls, she heard a car door slam. Her blood froze. It was past midnight. Who was arriving at this hour? Marcus, I have to go. Wait, don't hang up. Meet me somewhere public. A coffee shop, anywhere with lots of people. We'll figure this out together. Footsteps crunched across gravel, moving toward the motel office. Emma crept to the window and peered through a gap in the curtains. A black sedan sat in the parking lot, its engine still ticking as it cooled, the same model she'd seen outside Dr. Chen's office. They found me, she breathed into the phone. What? Emma, what's happening? She grabbed her bag, shoving the few belongings she had back inside. The flash drive went into her jacket pocket, pressed close to her heart. I have to run. Again. Tell me where you are. I'll come get you. A knock echoed through the thin door. 3 measured raps that sounded nothing like a late-night guest looking for directions. Mrs. Reed? A man's voice, calm and professional. We just want to talk. Emma's breath caught. She hadn't registered under her real name. Somehow they'd tracked her anyway. Emma, talk to me. Marcus's voice seemed to come from very far away. She moved toward the bathroom window, praying it would open. The lock was rusted, but it turned with effort. Cold night air rushed in. The flash drive, she whispered into the phone. If something happens to me, I'm going to try to mail it to you. Look for a package from... The door splintered inward with a crash that shook the entire room. Emma dropped the phone and squeezed through the bathroom window, her pregnant belly scraping against the frame. Behind her, she heard heavy footsteps and shouting voices. She hit the ground running, her bag clutched against her chest. The parking lot lights created pools of yellow in the darkness, islands of visibility she had to avoid. Behind her, more voices joined the first, at least 3 men, maybe more. The highway stretched ahead, empty and dark. Emma ran toward it, each step jarring through her swollen body, her unborn child the only thing keeping her moving forward into the night. The fluorescent lights of the 24-hour diner buzzed overhead as Emma slid into the cracked vinyl booth, her hands trembling as she wrapped them around the ceramic coffee mug. The waitress had given her decaf without asking, probably noticed the obvious curve of her belly beneath the oversized jacket she'd grabbed from the shelter's donation bin. Marcus sat across from her, his laptop bag clutched protectively against his chest. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and a thin cut across his cheek suggested his escape from Meridian's enforcers hadn't been as clean as he'd claimed over the phone. "Show me what you have," he said, glancing nervously toward the door. Emma pulled the flash drive from her pocket, the small device that had cost her everything: her apartment, her safety, nearly her life. Chemical analysis reports, shipping manifests, correspondence between Meridian executives. Everything was in that storage unit, like someone was building a case against them. Marcus plugged the drive into his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard. As the files loaded, his expression shifted from cautious hope to grim determination. "Jesus, Emma, this is bigger than I thought. These aren't just illegal dumping reports. This is systematic poisoning. They've been disposing of industrial waste in residential areas for years. The barrels in my unit? Part of a batch that was supposed to go to a licensed facility in Nevada. Instead, they buried them in a vacant lot that's now a playground." His voice dropped to a whisper. 37 children have been hospitalized in that neighborhood over the past 2 years. Respiratory issues, neurological problems, birth defects. Emma's hand instinctively moved to her stomach. The baby kicked, as if responding to her surge of protective fury. Who was collecting this evidence? Why didn't they go to the authorities? Marcus scrolled through a series of emails, his face pale in the laptop's glow. Dr. Sarah Chen, environmental scientist for the EPA. According to these files, she tried going through proper channels first. But look at this. He turned the screen toward Emma, showing an email thread. Every time she submitted a report, it got buried in bureaucratic red tape. Someone inside the EPA was feeding information back to Meridian. So she decided to gather enough evidence to go public. That's my guess. But she never got the chance. Marcus's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. "Emma, Dr. Chen died in a car accident 3 months ago. Single vehicle collision on a clear night, no skid marks." The coffee turned bitter in Emma's mouth. "They killed her." "Can't prove it, but the timing." He pulled up a news article. Her storage unit went up for auction just last week. Standard procedure when rent goes unpaid after death, but I bet Meridian thought they'd send someone to buy it. They probably never expected a pregnant woman looking for cheap furniture to outbid them. Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. $50. That's all it took to destroy my life. Or save thousands of others. Marcus began copying files to a secure server. With Dr. Chen's evidence and my inside knowledge of Meridian's structure, we can expose everything. But we need to move fast. They know you have this information, and they won't stop until... The diner's bell chimed as 2 men in dark suits entered. They moved with predatory efficiency, scanning the sparse late-night crowd. Emma's blood turned to ice as one of them made eye contact with her. "Run!" Marcus hissed, snapping the laptop shut. But there was nowhere to go. The men blocked the front exit, and Emma could see another figure stationed by the kitchen's back door through the pass-through window. Her pregnant body felt clumsy and slow as panic flooded her system. The nearest man approached their table, his hand moving inside his jacket. "Miss Crawford, Mr. Torres. You've led us quite a chase." Marcus stood slowly, positioning himself between Emma and the threat. "This is a public place. You can't just..." "Can't what?" "Have a conversation with an old colleague." The man smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "Sit down, Mr. Torres. Both of you. We have much to discuss." Emma's mind raced. The flash drive was still plugged into Marcus's laptop. If Meridian got their hands on it, Dr. Chen's sacrifice would mean nothing. All those children who'd been poisoned would never see justice. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, and something fierce awakened in Emma's chest. She thought of her daughter Lily, safe for now but growing up in a world where corporations could murder whistleblowers and bury evidence while children suffered. She thought of Dr. Chen, who died trying to protect people she'd never met. Emma's hand found the knife from her untouched pie slice. It wasn't much, but desperation had taught her that sometimes the smallest weapons could create the biggest opportunities. She caught Marcus's eye and saw understanding pass between them. Emma's hands trembled as she stared at the computer screen in the abandoned warehouse office. The spreadsheet she'd found buried in Marcus's encrypted files painted a picture of systematic poisoning that stretched back 15 years. Hexton Industries hadn't just been dumping toxic waste, they'd been testing it on entire communities, using water supplies as their laboratory. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her horror. She pressed one hand to her swollen belly while scrolling through the data with the other. Township after township, each marked with coordinates, chemical compositions and death rates. Cancer clusters that looked like natural occurrences but followed precise patterns of contamination. "Jesus," Marcus whispered from behind her, reading over her shoulder. They weren't just hiding waste disposal, they were conducting human trials. Emma clicked on a file labeled Phase 3 Results. Her breath caught as she recognized several town names from news reports she'd seen over the years, places that had suffered mysterious outbreaks of birth defects, neurological disorders, and aggressive cancers. Places where Hexton had quietly settled lawsuits out of court, always with ironclad NDAs. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a notation in red text. "They're planning to expand to 12 new sites next year." Marcus leaned closer, his face grim, including Millbrook. Emma's blood ran cold. Millbrook was where her sister lived with her 2 young children, where the elementary school drew its water from the same aquifer that would be contaminated if Hexton followed through with their plans. A sound from outside made them both freeze. Car engines, multiple vehicles approaching fast. "They found us," Marcus said, already moving toward the back exit. "We need to go, now." Emma grabbed the USB drive she'd been using to copy files, her fingers flying over the keyboard to initiate a data transfer to her cloud backup. The progress bar crept forward with agonizing slowness, 60%, 70%. The warehouse's front entrance exploded inward with a crash of splintering wood and twisted metal. Shouts echoed through the cavernous space as tactical teams poured inside. 80%, Emma breathed, watching the screen. The baby pressed against her bladder, adding to her discomfort as she fought the urge to run. Marcus grabbed her arm. "Emma, we have to leave it." 5 more seconds. The upload hit 95%. Footsteps thundered across the concrete floor below, growing closer to the office stairs. At 100%, Emma yanked the USB drive free and stumbled after Marcus toward the rear exit. Her pregnancy made her ungainly, and she couldn't move as fast as she needed to. Every step felt like running through quicksand. They burst through the back door into the humid night air just as the office door behind them exploded open. Shouts erupted from multiple directions. They were surrounded. Marcus pushed Emma toward a cluster of shipping containers that formed a maze of hiding spots. "This way. Stay low." They weaved between the metal giants, Emma's heart hammering so hard she worried it might hurt the baby. Behind them, flashlight beams swept through the darkness, accompanied by the crackle of radio communications. "Subjects are mobile, heading toward the container yard," someone reported. "Establish a perimeter." Emma's side cramped as they crouched behind a rust-streaked container. She bit her lip to keep from crying out, one hand pressed to the pane while the other clutched the USB drive that contained enough evidence to bring down Hexton Industries. Marcus peered around the container's edge, then ducked back quickly. At least 6 of them, maybe more. Professional outfit, not local cops. Corporate security? Or worse? These guys look military. The sound of approaching footsteps sent them deeper into the container maze. Emma's breathing grew labored, and she could feel sweat soaking through her shirt despite the cool night air. The baby seemed to sense the danger, moving restlessly inside her. They reached the far edge of the container yard, where a chain-link fence separated the warehouse property from a residential neighborhood. Marcus tested the fence. It was topped with razor wire. There, he pointed to a section where the fence had been damaged, probably by a truck backing into it. The gap was narrow, but they might be able to squeeze through. Emma looked at her swollen belly, then at the jagged opening. "I don't think I can fit." "You have to try." Marcus's voice was urgent. Behind them, the search teams were getting closer, their lights creating a moving constellation in the darkness. Emma approached the fence gap, turning sideways to minimize her profile. The metal edges scraped against her back as she pushed through, and for a terrifying moment she thought she was stuck. Then Marcus pushed from behind, and she popped through onto the other side. He followed quickly, and they found themselves in someone's backyard. A dog began barking from a nearby house, then another joined in. "The noise will draw them," Marcus said. "We need to move." Emma nodded, clutching the USB drive tighter. Whatever happened next, she had the evidence. Now, she just had to survive long enough to use it. Emma's hands trembled as she stared at the email confirmation on Marcus's laptop screen. The upload was complete. 37 gigabytes of damning evidence now sat on servers across 3 continents, ready to be released to every major news outlet simultaneously if anything happened to her. The dead man's switch she'd programmed would trigger in 12 hours unless she manually reset it. "There's no going back now," Marcus said quietly, closing the laptop. They sat in the cramped motel room as rain pelted the windows, the sound masking their whispered conversation. Emma pressed her hand to her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick restlessly. At 28 weeks, her pregnancy was becoming impossible to hide, and every movement reminded her of what she stood to lose. "They'll come harder now. Apex doesn't forgive threats. Then we make sure the story breaks before they find us." Marcus pulled out a burner phone. "Sarah Chen at the Tribune is expecting our call. She's already started preliminary fact-checking with the documents you sent yesterday." The plan was simple in theory: coordinate with journalists across multiple outlets to ensure simultaneous publication, making it impossible for Apex to suppress the story through legal threats or worse. But Emma knew Roland Vance wouldn't rely solely on lawyers. Men like Tommy Castellanos were already hunting for her, and they wouldn't hesitate to eliminate a pregnant woman who threatened their empire. A sudden knock at the door froze them both. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs as Marcus crept to the window, peering through a gap in the yellowed curtains. "Housekeeping," he whispered, relief evident in his voice. But Emma's paranoia had kept her alive this long. She grabbed the laptop and backup drives, shoving them into her bag. "We leave now." Marcus started to protest, but the look in her eyes silenced him. They'd learned to trust her instincts over the past week of running. Within minutes, they were slipping out the back exit, Emma's awkward gait slowing their progress as they made their way to the stolen sedan parked 3 blocks away. As they drove through the industrial district, Emma's phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Don't answer it," Marcus warned. But Emma was already swiping to accept. "Emma." Roland Vance's cultured voice filled the car through the speaker. "I think it's time we had a conversation. I have nothing to say to you." Emma's voice was steadier than she felt. "On the contrary, you have quite a lot to say. The question is whether you'll say it to me privately or to the world through your journalist friends." A pause. "I know about Sarah Chen. I know about the uploads. Did you really think we wouldn't be monitoring every digital fingerprint you leave?" Emma's blood turned to ice. If Apex had tracked their communications, Sarah could already be dead. The baby kicked hard, as if sensing her distress. "What do you want?" she asked. "A trade. You destroy all copies of the stolen data, sign a very generous non-disclosure agreement, and walk away rich enough to give that child the life you never had. In exchange, I ensure your safety and the safety of everyone you've involved. And if I refuse, then you'll learn why Apex has survived and prospered for 40 years. We don't leave loose ends, Emma. Not even pregnant ones." The line went dead. Emma stared at the phone, her mind racing. Vance's offer was tempting, more money than she'd ever imagined, enough to disappear forever and raise her child far from Apex's reach. But she'd seen what was in those barrels, hundreds of drums of toxic waste that should have been properly disposed of, instead dumped in abandoned storage facilities and forgotten neighborhoods across the country. Children were dying because of Apex's greed. "He's bluffing," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The story's too big now. Too many journalists involved." Emma wasn't so sure. Apex had murdered Dr. Patricia Webb for asking questions. They'd killed the storage unit's original owner to keep him quiet. What was a few more bodies to protect billions in profits? Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Sarah Chen. "Emma, we have a problem." The journalist's voice was tight with fear. "Someone broke into my apartment last night, tore the place apart, but didn't take anything valuable. They left a message spray-painted on my bedroom wall. Stop digging or join the dirt." Emma closed her eyes. Vance wasn't bluffing. He was escalating. "Sarah, you need to disappear. Right now. Take the story to your editor and—" "Already did. But Emma, there's something else. I've been digging into Apex's corporate structure, and I found something that changes everything. Roland Vance isn't just the CEO. According to documents I found in a subsidiary's bankruptcy filing, he's also been using Apex as a front for something much worse than illegal dumping." Emma's hands tightened on the phone. "What do you mean? The barrels you found? They're not just industrial waste. Some of them contain evidence of human experimentation. Apex has been using homeless populations as test subjects for experimental chemicals. Emma, we're not just talking about environmental crimes. We're talking about crimes against humanity." The abandoned textile factory squatted against the grey morning sky like a wounded beast, its broken windows staring down at Emma as she approached the loading dock. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat reminding her of the life growing inside her belly, 6 months now, big enough that running had become more of a determined waddle. Marcus Chen stepped out from behind a rusted shipping container, his face gaunt with exhaustion. The investigative journalist who had first contacted her 3 weeks ago looked like he hadn't slept since. His camera bag hung heavy across his shoulder, and she could see the outline of recording equipment beneath his jacket. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I don't have much choice left." Emma clutched the laptop bag containing copies of everything: lab results, shipping manifests, the damning internal memos she'd managed to decode from the water-damaged documents. "They found my hotel last night." Marcus's eyes darkened. "How did you get away?" "Fire escape. Spent the night in my car behind a 24-hour diner." She rubbed her lower back where the cramped sleeping position had left her aching. "But they're getting closer. That woman, Dr. Sarah Voss, she's not going to stop. Neither are we." Marcus gestured toward the factory entrance. "My contact is already inside. 3 major networks are standing by for simultaneous broadcast. Once this goes live, Meridian Industries can't contain it." They made their way through a gap in the chain-link fence, Emma moving carefully over the uneven ground. The baby kicked, a sharp jab that made her pause and breathe through the discomfort. Marcus noticed and slowed his pace. "How much further?" she asked. "Just inside. We set up in the old supervisor's office. Good sight lines, multiple exits." He paused. "Emma, once we do this, there's no going back. They'll throw everything they have at discrediting you." She thought of the barrels she'd found in that storage unit, the toxic cocktail of industrial waste that Meridian had been secretly dumping for years. The groundwater contamination reports that showed spiking cancer rates in 3 rural counties. The cover-up that went all the way to the top. "People are dying," she said simply. "Kids are getting sick. That's more important than whatever they try to do to me." Inside the factory, Dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight streaming through broken windows. Their footsteps echoed in the cavernous space as Marcus led her toward a metal staircase. Halfway up, Emma's phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost ignored it, then answered on instinct. Miss Shaw. The voice was crisp, professional, terrifyingly calm. Dr. Sarah Voss. I believe you have something that belongs to us. Emma's blood turned to ice. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you do. Those documents were stolen from a secure facility. Corporate espionage is a serious federal crime. A pause, but we're prepared to be reasonable, especially considering your delicate condition. Marcus had stopped on the stairs above her, watching with growing alarm. What do you want? Emma asked. A meeting. Just you and me. We can discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement, something that ensures your child's future security, college funds, medical care, a comfortable life. All you have to do is return our property and sign a simple non-disclosure agreement. Emma's free hand moved protectively to her belly. And if I refuse? Well, that would be unfortunate for everyone involved. The threat was delivered in the same pleasant tone one might use to order coffee. You have 1 hour to decide. I'll send coordinates to your phone. The line went dead. What did she say? Marcus demanded. Emma's hands were shaking as she pocketed the phone. She wants to make a deal, trying to buy my silence. You can't seriously be considering. Of course not. But even as she said it, Emma felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. She was 6 months pregnant, alone, being hunted by a corporation with unlimited resources. What kind of life could she give her child if they were always running? Marcus seemed to read her thoughts. Emma, these people don't make deals. They eliminate problems. If you meet with her... I know. She forced herself to keep climbing the stairs. But maybe we can use this. Set up the meeting, but have your camera crew ready. Get her on record making threats. Too dangerous. Everything's dangerous now. They reached the top of the stairs, and Emma could see the makeshift broadcast setup through the supervisor's office windows. Banks of equipment, satellite uplinks, the infrastructure of exposure. But if we can get her talking, get her to admit what Meridian's been doing. A sound from below made them both freeze. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving quickly across the factory floor. Marcus grabbed her arm. They're here. Emma's phone buzzed again. New coordinates had arrived, along with a single text message, "Time's up." The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town felt like stepping into a tomb. Emma's footsteps echoed against concrete walls as she followed Marcus deeper into the shadows, her hand instinctively protective over her belly. The baby had been restless all morning, as if sensing her mounting anxiety. "The samples are hidden in the back office," Marcus whispered, his voice tight with paranoia. He kept glancing over his shoulder, jumping at every small sound. "I've been moving them every few days, just in case." Emma's phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Are you sure about this guy? Something feels wrong." She quickly typed back. "Too late now. We'll check in soon." The office was a cramped space filled with rusted filing cabinets and water-stained cardboard boxes. Marcus pulled away a loose panel in the wall, revealing a small cavity containing 3 sealed vials of murky liquid and a thick manila folder. "These are from the original batch," he said, handling the vials like they contained poison. Which, Emma realized with a chill, they probably did. The documentation shows the whole process, how Meridian has been dumping industrial waste disguised as fertilizer for over a decade. Emma opened the folder with trembling fingers. The pages inside detailed contamination levels, falsified EPA reports, and payment records to government officials. It was everything she needed to destroy Meridian Corporation, but as she read, a growing unease settled in her chest. "Marcus, how did you get access to all this? You said you were just a lab tech." His eyes darted away. "I had help. Someone higher up who wanted to see the truth come out." "Who?" Before he could answer, the distant sound of car doors slamming echoed through the warehouse. Marcus went pale, his hands shaking as he grabbed the vials. "They found us," he breathed. Oh God, they found us. Emma's blood turned to ice. How? How could they have found us? The sound of footsteps, multiple sets, moving with military precision, grew closer. Marcus was backing toward a rear exit, but something in his expression made Emma's stomach drop. Guilt, fear, but not surprise. You called them, she whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. You're working for them. I didn't have a choice. Marcus's voice cracked. They have my daughter. They said they'd hurt her if I didn't. Where is she? The voice cut through the air like a blade. Director Sarah Chen stepped into the office, flanked by 2 security operatives. Her smile was cold and satisfied. There you are, Emma. You've led us on quite a chase. Emma clutched the folder to her chest, her mind racing for escape routes. The rear exit was blocked by another operative, and Chen stood between her and the main door. She was trapped. The samples, please. Chen extended her hand. And all the documentation. So you can cover up more murders? Emma's voice was stronger than she felt. How many people have died from your contamination? How many children? Chen's expression didn't change. Business requires difficult decisions. Meridian employs thousands of people, generates billions in revenue. A few statistical anomalies don't outweigh the greater good. Statistical anomalies? Emma felt rage building in her chest. You're talking about human lives. I'm talking about reality. Chen took a step closer. You're one pregnant woman with stolen property. We're a corporation with unlimited resources and government connections. How do you think this ends? Emma's phone was buzzing incessantly in her pocket, Jake trying to reach her. She hoped he was smart enough to stay away, but knowing him, he was probably already on his way. The thing is, Emma said, surprised by her own calm, I'm not the only one who knows anymore. You're too late. Chen's eyes narrowed. Explain. Copies of everything have already been sent to journalists, federal investigators, and environmental groups. Kill me, and you just confirm everything they'll publish tomorrow. It was a bluff, but Emma sold it with every ounce of conviction she possessed. Chen studied her face for a long moment, clearly trying to determine if she was lying. Marcus shifted nervously. You said if I brought her here, my daughter would be safe. Where is she? Chen didn't even look at him. Your daughter is fine. She's at school, probably wondering why her father betrayed an innocent woman. The devastation on Marcus's face was complete. He'd been played, used as bait, and now faced the same threat Emma did. However, Chen continued, perhaps we can reach an accommodation. The samples and documentation, in exchange for your continued health and that of your unborn child. Emma's hand moved protectively to her belly. The baby kicked, strong and insistent, reminding her of what she was fighting for. Not just her own life, but the future she wanted to give her child. A future where corporations couldn't poison communities and silence witnesses. I need guarantees, Emma said. Legal documents ensuring. The warehouse lights suddenly cut out, plunging them into complete darkness. Emma's hands trembled as she stared at the laboratory results spread across Dr. Martinez's desk. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the damning evidence that could bring down Nexus Industries. 6 months pregnant and exhausted, she pressed her palm against her rounded belly, feeling the baby's restless movements as if sensing her distress. The contamination levels are off the charts, Dr. Martinez whispered, his weathered face grave. What they dumped in those barrels? Emma, this isn't just toxic waste, it's experimental chemical compounds that were banned decades ago. The groundwater contamination alone will affect thousands of people. Detective Sarah Chen leaned forward, studying the charts with calculating eyes. This is enough to shut them down permanently. But we need to move fast. My contact at the FBI says Nexus has been making calls to some very dangerous people. They're not planning to just discredit you anymore, Emma. They want you gone. A chill ran down Emma's spine. Through the small window of the university lab, she could see 2 black SUVs parked across the street. The same vehicles that had been following her for days. They're already here, she said quietly. Dr. Martinez gathered the papers quickly. There's a service elevator in the back. It connects to the underground parking garage. Sarah, can you get her out? Wait. Emma's voice cut through their urgent planning. I'm tired of running. These results need to get out, but hiding won't accomplish anything. They'll just keep coming. She turned to Sarah. What if we force their hand instead? What are you thinking? A press conference. Tonight. We make everything public before they can stop us. Emma's mind raced, adrenaline cutting through her fatigue. Channel 7's investigative reporter Janet Morrison. She's been trying to reach me for days. If we give her an exclusive with all this evidence. Sarah shook her head. Too risky. The moment you go public, you become a bigger target. I'm already a target. Emma's voice cracked with frustration. My baby is a target. At least this way their secret dies with me if something happens. Right now, I'm the only threat to them. Once this is public knowledge, killing me becomes pointless. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Dr. Martinez quickly stuffed the documents into a manila envelope, sealing it with tape. Take the service elevator, now. Sarah grabbed Emma's arm, guiding her toward the back of the lab. There's a safe house across town. We can set up the press conference from there. They slipped into the narrow service corridor just as voices became audible outside the lab door. Emma's heart pounded as they descended in the cramped elevator, her breathing shallow and quick. The baby kicked hard, as if protesting the stress, and she winced. You okay? Sarah asked, noticing her discomfort. Just scared, Emma admitted. 6 months ago, my biggest worry was paying rent. Now I'm carrying evidence that could topple $1 billion corporation. The elevator opened into the underground garage. Sarah's unmarked police car sat in the shadows between 2 concrete pillars. As they hurried toward it, Emma caught sight of movement near the garage entrance. More black SUVs. They've surrounded the building, Sarah muttered, drawing her weapon. Stay behind me. They reached the car, and Sarah started the engine while Emma clutched the envelope to her chest. There, she pointed to an exit ramp on the far side of the garage. It leads to the street behind the science building. Sarah gunned the engine, tires squealing against concrete. In the rearview mirror, Emma watched as men in dark suits emerged from the shadows, speaking urgently into radios. They'd been spotted. As they burst into daylight on the adjacent street, Emma pulled out her phone and dialed Janet Morrison's direct line. The reporter answered on the first ring. This is Emma Caldwell, she said breathlessly. I have the story you've been looking for, but it has to happen tonight. Do you have a secure location for a live broadcast? Emma Caldwell, the woman from the storage unit story? We've been trying to find you for weeks. Yes, absolutely. How soon can you get here? 1 hour. And Janet, bring security. The people involved in this don't want the truth coming out. She hung up and turned to Sarah. Channel 7's studio on 5th Street. They have a secure broadcast facility. Sarah checked her mirrors again. No immediate pursuit, but that wouldn't last long. Emma, once you do this press conference, there's no going back. You'll be marked for life. Emma touched her belly again, feeling her daughter's strong, steady heartbeat beneath her palm. She deserves a world where corporations can't poison communities and get away with it. We're doing this. The city blurred past as they sped toward downtown, carrying evidence that would either save Emma's life or seal her fate. Behind them, Nexus Industries was mobilizing every resource to stop her. Ahead lay the chance to finally expose the truth. The abandoned warehouse felt like a tomb as Emma crouched behind a stack of rusted metal drums, her heart hammering against her ribs. The baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing the danger that surrounded them. Through the grimy windows, she could see the headlights of at least 3 vehicles circling the building like vultures. Marcus gripped her shoulder, his face grim in the pale moonlight filtering through the skylights. They found us faster than I expected, he whispered, checking his phone. Sarah's still 20 minutes out with the backup files. 20 minutes might as well have been 20 hours. Emma could hear boots on gravel outside, the low murmur of voices coordinating their approach. Nexus Corporation had sent a full team this time, No more pretending this was anything other than a hunt. "The back exit?" Emma asked, though she already knew the answer from Marcus's expression. "Blocked. They've got us surrounded." He pulled out a small device that looked like a modified phone, but I uploaded everything to the cloud before we lost the connection. Even if they... The main door exploded inward with a thunderous crash. Tactical lights swept the warehouse like searching fingers, and Emma pressed herself deeper into the shadows. Her swollen belly made every movement awkward, every hiding spot inadequate. "Emma Chen," a familiar voice called out, echoing off the concrete walls. Dr. Reginald Voss, Nexus's head of operations, stepped through the ruined doorway flanked by 6 armed men. "You've led us quite a chase, but it's time to be reasonable." Emma's blood ran cold. She'd seen Voss's photograph in the leaked documents, the man responsible for ordering the illegal dumping that had poisoned an entire community, the man who'd authorized the cover-up that buried evidence of birth defects and cancer clusters. "We know you're here," Voss continued, his tone sickeningly paternal. "And we know about your condition. We don't want to hurt you or the baby. We simply want to resolve this misunderstanding." Marcus caught her eye and pointed toward a service ladder leading to a maintenance catwalk 20 feet above. Emma shook her head frantically. There was no way she could climb that quietly in her condition. But the alternative was surrender, and she'd seen what happened to Nexus's problems when they needed resolving. A tactical light swept dangerously close to their hiding spot. Emma held her breath, feeling the baby's movements still as if it too understood the need for silence. The light moved on, but she knew it would circle back. "Dr. Caldwell," Voss called out. "Marcus, isn't it? We know you're here too. Former EPA investigator, fired for refusing to falsify water quality reports. You always were too idealistic for practical work." The words hit their mark. Emma saw Marcus's jaw clench, his hand tightening on the device. She realized it wasn't just an uplink. It was a dead man's switch. If something happened to him, the files would automatically transmit to every major news outlet. "Your little insurance policy won't work," Voss said, as if reading their thoughts. "We've been monitoring all communication channels in a 3-mile radius. Nothing gets out without our permission." Emma's heart sank, but then she noticed something. Marcus was smiling, not the expression of a man who'd been outmaneuvered, but someone who knew something his opponents didn't. The sound of approaching sirens began as a distant wail but grew steadily louder. Voss's confident demeanor flickered for just a moment before he barked orders at his men. "Positions, we finish this now." But the sirens weren't alone. Emma heard the distinctive whop of helicopter rotors, and suddenly the warehouse was bathed in blinding white light from above. A loudspeaker crackled to life. "This is Agent Patricia Santos, FBI. The building is surrounded. Drop your weapons and exit with your hands visible." Sarah had done more than just bring backup files. She'd brought the cavalry. The federal investigation that Emma had fought so hard to trigger was finally here 6 months after she'd first opened those damning barrels. Voss's men looked uncertain now, their tactical advantage evaporating as federal agents poured through every entrance. But Voss himself seemed to shed his corporate mask entirely, revealing something cold and desperate underneath. "If I can't contain this," he said, loud enough for his voice to carry, "then there won't be anything left to investigate." He pulled out a device Emma recognized with growing horror, a detonator. The warehouse they'd chosen for their meeting wasn't just abandoned, it was another Nexus disposal site. Who knew what chemicals were buried beneath the concrete floor? What would happen if this place went up? "Everyone dies here tonight," Voss announced, his thumb hovering over the trigger. "The investigation dies with you." Emma felt the baby kick hard, as if urging her to move. 6 months of running, 6 months of terror, and it all came down to this moment. She could stay hidden and hope the FBI reached them in time, or she could do what she'd been doing since the day she bought that storage unit. She could fight back. The warehouse district stretched out before them like a concrete wasteland, shadows dancing between towering industrial buildings under the harsh glare of sodium lights. Emma pressed her hand against her swollen belly, feeling the baby's restless movements as Marcus navigated the van through narrow alleyways lined with loading docks and chain-link fences. "Third building from the corner," she whispered, consulting the address Dr. Chen had provided before disappearing into witness protection. Blue door with the faded Meridian Industries logo. Marcus killed the headlights as they approached, the van's engine ticking softly as it cooled. Through the windshield, Emma could see the facility, a nondescript brick structure that looked abandoned, except for the single security camera mounted above the entrance. Her pulse quickened. After 6 months of running, hiding, and piecing together fragments of truth, they were finally at the source. "You sure about this?" Marcus asked, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. "We go in there. There's no turning back. Meridian will know we've found their dirty little secret." Emma nodded, though fear churned in her stomach alongside the baby's kicks. "We need proof they can't destroy or discredit. Something that will hold up in court and in the media. Dr. Chen said the original test results are in there, the ones that show they knew the chemicals were causing birth defects 5 years before they started dumping them in storage units." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the empty street. Emma thought about the journey that had brought them here, from that first $50 storage unit purchase to the revelation that Meridian Industries had been using abandoned units across 3 states as illegal disposal sites for their failed pharmaceutical experiments. The barrels she'd found were just the beginning, a small piece of a massive cover-up that had already claimed dozens of lives. "The security system is motion-activated," Marcus said, studying the building through binoculars. "But according to your hacker friend, we've got a 30-minute window before the monitoring service checks in again." Emma's phone buzzed with a text from Jake, the computer specialist who'd been helping them track Meridian's digital footprints from his basement hideout. "Guards changed shift 10 minutes ago. You're clear until 2 a.m. Don't screw this up." She showed Marcus the message, then carefully climbed out of the van, wincing as her back protested the movement. The baby seemed to sense her tension, pressing insistently against her ribs. At 7 months pregnant, every step required careful consideration, but she refused to let Marcus go in alone. This was her fight, had been since the moment she'd opened those first barrels and breathed in the toxic fumes that nearly killed her. The lock-picking tools felt foreign in her trembling hands, but Marcus guided her through the process with whispered instructions. Click by click, the mechanism gave way, and the blue door swung open to reveal a sterile corridor lined with fluorescent fixtures that flickered to life automatically. "Motion sensors," Marcus breathed, pulling out his phone to start recording. "Document everything." They moved quickly through the facility, past laboratories filled with centrifuges and chemical analysis equipment, past offices with Meridian's corporate materials still scattered across desks. Emma's heart hammered as they reached the records room, where filing cabinets stretched from floor to ceiling like metal monuments to corporate malfeasance. "Project Clearwater," she whispered, reading the labels. "That's what Dr. Chen mentioned, their code name for the illegal disposal operation." Marcus pulled out entire drawers, while Emma photographed every page she could manage, despite her shaking hands. Internal memos detailing known health risks, financial projections that factored in acceptable casualty rates, and most damning of all, a list of storage facilities across the country where they dumped contaminated materials. "Jesus," Marcus breathed, holding up a medical report. They've been tracking affected families. They knew about the miscarriages, the birth defects, everything. They have a whole database of victims they've been monitoring to make sure they stayed quiet. Emma's name was in that database, along with her medical records, her financial information, and a risk assessment that classified her as a high-priority threat requiring immediate neutralization. The clinical language made her skin crawl. A soft chime echoed through the building, followed by a mechanical voice announcing security sweep commencing in T-5 minutes. Emergency lighting bathed the corridor in pulsing red as automated systems prepared for the scheduled check-in. "Time to go," Marcus said, stuffing crucial documents into his backpack, while Emma grabbed the computer drives containing the digital records. They ran through the facility as alarms began to sound, Emma's pregnant form making the sprint an agonizing ordeal. Behind them, she could hear vehicles pulling into the parking lot, too early for the regular security sweep. Someone had been watching them. The rear exit came into view just as shouting erupted from the front of the building. Emma clutched the evidence against her chest, knowing that these documents represented not just her vindication, but justice for every family Meridian had destroyed in their pursuit of profit. The warehouse felt like a tomb as Emma crouched behind the rusted machinery, her phone's camera rolling silently. Through the viewfinder, she watched Dr. Harrison's face contort with fury as he screamed at his subordinates about the missing barrels. The audio was crystal clear. Every damning word about the illegal dumping, the cover-up, the murdered whistleblowers. Her baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing the danger. 6 months along now, Emma could barely move quietly, but she'd made it this far. The evidence she needed was finally within reach. "Find her," Harrison's voice echoed off the concrete walls. "She's here somewhere. That bitch has cost us everything." Emma's finger trembled over the stop button, but she forced herself to keep recording. This was it, the confession that would bring down Meridian Industries and everyone involved in poisoning Riverside's water supply. The barrels she'd bought for $50 had contained enough industrial toxins to kill thousands, and now she had proof of the conspiracy that went all the way to the top. Footsteps approached her hiding spot. Emma held her breath, pressing herself deeper into the shadows between two massive generators. The beam of a flashlight swept inches from her face. "Boss, we've checked everywhere. Maybe she got out." "Impossible. We have the perimeter locked down. She's pregnant and alone. How far could she get?" If only they knew about Jake positioned on the roof with his sniper rifle, or Detective Morrison's team waiting for her signal just outside the fence. Emma wasn't as alone as they thought, but she was still the one who had to get close enough to record their confessions. The baby shifted again, and Emma bit back a gasp as a sharp pain shot through her abdomen. Not now. She couldn't go into labor now, not when she was so close to ending this nightmare that had consumed her life for months. Harrison pulled out his phone, and Emma zoomed in as he dialed. "It's me. Yes, I know what time it is. We have a problem." A pause. "The witness is here, in the warehouse. She's recording us." Emma's blood ran cold as she realized Harrison knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't a secret meeting she'd stumbled upon. It was a trap. "Did you really think we didn't know about your little investigation, Emma?" His voice was closer now, much closer. Emma looked up to find Harrison standing directly above her, his gun pointed at her head. 3 men flanked him, their weapons drawn. "Stand up." Slowly, Emma struggled to her feet, keeping the phone hidden behind her back. The recording was still running, still capturing everything. Even if they killed her, the evidence would survive. "You've been very persistent," Harrison said conversationally. "I'll give you credit for that. Most people would have taken our generous offers to relocate and disappear quietly. Most people don't have children dying of cancer because of your poison," Emma replied, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Harrison's expression didn't change. "Acceptable losses. The greater good requires sacrifice sometimes." "Whose greater good? Your shareholders?" "Progress, my dear. Industrial advancement. You wouldn't understand." Another contraction gripped Emma's abdomen, stronger this time. She couldn't hide the grimace of pain. Harrison noticed immediately. "Oh, this is perfect. We'll make it look like a tragic accident. Pregnant woman breaks into abandoned warehouse, goes into premature labor, bleeds out before help arrives. Very sad. Except I won't be alone much longer," Emma said, praying Jake was in position. "Your boyfriend on the roof? We took care of him 20 minutes ago." Emma's heart stopped. "You're lying." Harrison smiled coldly and pulled out a second phone, showing her a photo. Jake, unconscious and bleeding, zip-tied in what looked like a van. The detective, too. Amazing how easy it is to stage a car accident on these dark country roads. The world tilted around Emma. Morrison was supposed to be her backup plan, her safety net. If both Jake and Morrison were compromised, she truly was alone. But the phone was still recording. Why? She asked, buying time. Why dump the toxins in Riverside? There had to be legal disposal options. Legal disposal costs money, lots of money. It was much more efficient to find a small town that wouldn't ask questions until children started dying. Until you started poking around where you didn't belong. Emma felt wetness between her legs and realized her water had broken. The baby was coming, ready or not. Harrison raised his gun. Any last words for your child? Emma looked directly into the camera she'd hidden behind a pipe hours earlier, the backup recording device Harrison didn't know about. Justice, she said clearly. Then the warehouse exploded into chaos as the FBI team Morrison had contacted before his capture burst through every entrance simultaneously, their voices booming commands. As Emma collapsed to the concrete floor, her phone's final recording capturing the moment everything changed.